Well, greetings and thanks for joining us for another episode of Lightbulb Moments, episode number 180. We're live most Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Central Time, and we're also on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. So thanks for joining us today. I'm Tom Kuhn. I'm host and curator of Lightbulb Moments. I'm also CEO and founder of Cunity. A light bulb moment is a sudden realization, enlightenment, or inspiration. And remember, you can't start a fire without a spark. So hopefully these sessions provide a spark for you. At Cunity, we're here to help you go from what's confusing, overwhelming, and complicated to a clear path towards prosperity. And to prosper, remember to manage your ATM, the three currencies we have in life: attention, time, and money. And thanks again for spending your precious time with us. Check out recent episodes. And the very last episode we have was on a Cunity concept called ACE, which stands for Appreciate, Care, Challenge, and Encourage. And it's a simple and visual system to drive engagement. It is one of the original Cunity concepts, and we brought some fresh light to it, brought it top of mind to many people because connection is so needed and warranted. And this gives you a way to help systematize it and stay authentic at the same time. So check out that episode. We love hearing from you, whether it's in the chat, by email, or any comments you might have that you post on the YouTube channel or podcast. Stay in touch with us. Hopefully you use the chat today if you're with us live and put in your own comments, questions, feedback, etc. Some of the themes that we cover on Lightbulb Moments include multi-generational ownership as well as succession. And today is going to be a session that is very much about succession, and we'll get to why just in a moment. Other themes we cover are career and beauty, data and tech and touch, as well as inspiration. So we have had episodes that really cover all of these. And again, today we're going to go into the area of succession. And so really what succession is all about, it's helping owners and leaders grow, go, or let go. It doesn't always mean that an owner is going to go. It might simply mean that this is a way for an owner to let go. But in certain cases, it definitely is part of a go strategy where an owner is looking to sell their business. Our guest today is Susan Wos of SalonSpa Connection. She is a specialist as it relates to succession planning in the sense that she works more on the brokerage side. So we're going to invite Susan to the conversation very shortly here. So a little bit more about Susan shortly here. Lightbulb Moments is proudly sponsored by Lightheart Sanders and Zenoti. Thanks to both of them for their sponsorship. And we have coming up the Phil. It'll be here before we know it. It is May 18th through 20th down in Austin, Texas. Our theme will be play, which is really highlighting the importance of tactile learning, gamification, and taking a fresh approach to how you spend your time away from your business. Remember, the Phil is all about filling the gaps of your business and then also filling your bucket by getting away from your day-to-day environment, which we all need. The Phil is going to be once again in Austin, Texas, and we certainly hope you'll join us. We are deep into the final results from the 2024 P&L benchmark study. We've talked about it quite a bit on this forum, and we'll continue to talk more about it. We will soon, we're starting to have one-on-ones with participants that were part of the study, which are the very first people that will get in-depth findings, but we'll continue to highlight certain findings, and they're very rich, very interesting, very informative, and suggest really some new models for doing business going forward that's really based upon data, which is the best form of evidence. Don't forget to check out Money 02 podcast by Aaron Kuhn-Bonsali. And so my light bulb moment this week really relates with succession planning. And so on Sunday, which was just a few days ago, we actually filmed a succession masterclass. It was live. We did it in person in Austin, Texas, which is where I'm at right now. And we have only offered this course live in person, and we've done it several times with my partner on this particular body work, Heath Smith. And so Sunday we updated the course. We made it a little more digestible. We added a bunch more stuff to it. We took certain things out that weren't as necessary, and we filmed it. And we soon will have finally our Succession Masterclass that those can experience virtually without having to wait or go in person. And it's really designed to help an owner or a key employee or some interested party that really has a desire to be in an even better place in the future than they are today, whether it's a current owner or a future owner. And it's really designed to help a lot of the problems that come up or a lot of the challenges as it relates to the confusion around it, maybe not knowing where to start, all sorts of questions like how much is my business worth? Who do I sell it to? If I'm going to sell it to a key employee, how do I really bring up that conversation with the key employee? There's all sorts of things and all sorts of places where people might get stuck. And, ultimately, we're there as just the guide and provide a pretty simple process, which is all about how you know, plan, and do. And what we really do is compel, each of you to take action, whatever that looks like for you and your customized plan, your customized situation. And we're just seeing just tremendous results and how fun it is to see successful plans where people move on to what's next. One of the great case studies we have is with Carrie Bennett and Anna Johnson, who together work together for a seamless transition from owner to key employee. But really unpacking that story reveals all of the different steps along the way. And they certainly had their challenges along the way, and they tell their story with truth and passion. And I'm so proud of both of them because both of them are in an even better place today than they were in the past. And that is actually featured as part of this succession master class. We go through topics like why key employees. There's like 13 reasons, the different reasons why to acquire as opposed to open new. We have 8 owner myths and traps, 13 areas of buyer's remorse, why size matters, communication matters. That's a big one. We get a lot of questions on what to say, what not to say, how to roll something out, where non-disclosures come in. And then we have a section all about valuation. And then finally, and I think really the strength of the course is the case studies. The case studies are all beauty industry specific. They're very relevant. They touch upon several points. And getting to the punchline, and our guest today, Susan. Susan has a great case study that's actually featured in the Succession Masterclass. And I'm so pleased to welcome Susan with us today. Susan, how are you this morning?
I'm great, Tom. How are you?
I'm good. It's always a delight to work with you. You are a delightful person. You're doing tremendous work. And we've been partnering on several things together, including this recent case study. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
So you are we'll call it a niche business broker,
Yes.
and explain to our audience what that means.
So being a hairstylist for 30 years and a former salon owner, I feel as if I have a lot of deep innate understanding of the beauty industry. I, opened a business in 2017. Our focus was different, but it gave me the opportunity to really understand on a very deep level, sort of the broad spectrum of not only just employees and booth renters, but really salon, spa, and barbershop owners. I started my business by going in person to every single one of my clients and really deep diving with them as far as what recruitment meant to them. And so that really opened the door for me to understand a very broad range of, personalities, business types, vibe, you name it. I've heard about it. And so, starting with selling came in 2019, not really something I had planned, but I had sold my business on my own. And I found that it was really tough working with a traditional broker because they didn't understand the salon, spa, and barber industry. The service-based industries are highly nuanced. And I think unless you've lived it, it's really hard to understand, the value in a beauty business and how that translates to a buyer. So here I am today, the beauty industry broker, and I have several team members. And so that's what we do. That our core service is helping buyers, helping sellers, and, nurturing transactions to the finish line.
Yeah, it's been a great collaboration with you and your brokers, and we don't do the same thing. I mean, we're not in the business of being involved necessarily in the transaction, and we're not commission based. I mean, what we do is more on the readiness side, which in many cases is a precursor to getting your business listed. But I've really enjoyed our collaboration, and so let's talk about a case study, which I think um, brings out a lot of things that might come up, not necessarily brokerage specific, but more about a sale. So the case study I'm referring to is one you worked on recently, one of your brokers, and we don't even need to say where it was, all right? But this was a little bit different than a lot of deals, well, in a lot of respects, but I'm going to highlight one right away. So in this particular case, this case study, it not only had the business for sale, but it also had the real estate for sale. Talk about that a little bit and how, when there's a situation like that, how that might impact everything.
Well, it's really great when someone owns a building and a business. Truthfully, there's a lot more value in that just because there's a lot more tangible value. However, we have seen a couple of owners that will lump both of those in together as far as the way that they manage their books and their taxes, and that can be problematic. This particular owner did not. He had it separated. He had the building separated, from the P&Ls and the tax returns of the business. And so that made it pretty easy for us to separate the two. Our main focus was on the business, and it was fairly easy to translate that value just because it was very clean as far as the books are concerned.
So it's really two valuations in that case.
Yes,
There's an appraisal on the real estate and a valuation on the business, right?
yes, totally separate.
We talk about readiness, and I have seen some deals where an owner owned real estate and the business, and they were commingled. I'm thinking of one in specific. It delayed things by 3 years to have decoupled because otherwise he wanted to sell them separately, but it wasn't set up right. Do you see that happen often, or do you not see a lot of deals where real estate and business are sold at the same time?
We see more real estate involved than you would imagine. And my prediction wasn't that it would be this high, but it's, gosh, probably around 20 to 15% of the owners that we work with that own the building. And so I would say that's fairly high on the large scene, I suppose. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's wonderful when that happens. But if the books are not really accurately categorized, it makes it very challenging.
So this business that's sold
Mhm.
and sold this year, is that right?
Yes.
And how long was the process? Because this one actually, would you say, well, first of all, how long was the process? And would you consider that to be slow or fast?
This one I thought went pretty fast. We listed this business in August of 2024. We got an offer in December, and then it actually closed in February, so just last month. And we tell all of our sellers to expect 6 months to a year. The more complex the sale is, the more that's involved, typically the longer it takes. This one went fast, in my opinion, just based on the business and the building, and that was two separate transactions. So 6 months to a year is really a good expectation to set when selling, whether to a key employee or to someone else. And it really depends on how fast the buyers move. That's kind of the key here.
Yeah, and certain things that will extend that tremendously is readiness. Is the business ready and is the seller ready? And if they're not ready, and that's where we come in, is we help them get ready. So when they do list, there's no delay. Because now what happens if someone lists a business for sale and you find out that there's all of these issues with the business that make it not ready? For example, the books aren't cleaned up. Maybe there's some unfavorable debt. Maybe there is a lien on the assets that remains from the past. I mean, so how does that affect the time frame?
Well, we won't list unless their books are clean and easy to understand. We can't broker that business because we have to translate the value to the buyer. And if it's really unclear, it's going to be really problematic during due diligence. And so what we say, we send the sellers back, clean up your books, give us a call when you're ready. So that's one of the main things with readiness, is having the clear and easy to understand books. As far as debt is concerned, that's not really an issue, just because the seller keeps the debt. So it's, the buyer very rarely assumes the debt. And so we can move forward. There's a lot of loans, especially from COVID, still out there. And so we do see that. I would say 98% of the owners that we've been working with have debt. And so that's not really an issue. If there's legal issues, liens and things like that, that's a whole nother story. And then we get an attorney involved to really fully understand what that means. But yeah, the more you can prepare yourself with clean books, the better. And we do obviously reserve the right to say, we're not real comfortable with this, because we know what it looks like with the buyer and the SBA and how this goes down the pipeline. So yes, we typically will send people away if they are not what we would call ready.
So in this particular case, the seller attempted to sell on his own. Do you want to talk about that for a little bit?
Yes, so he was pretty anxious to sell. He had decided to relocate to the south. He was in the north, and it was definitely a long plane ride away, not drivable. And so I think that he had that in mind, building a house, all that good stuff. And so he took it upon himself to try to sell the business. We don't know what his buyer recruitment tactics were, but he did have a couple interested buyers. Matter of fact, he had come to the table twice with two different buyers, and both times the deal did not go through. So out of frustration, he called us in order to handle the deal. And so we did see it to fruition, and we now understand maybe why he was unable to successfully sell it on his own. He was very smart and very business savvy, but there may be some personality issues there that would have caused some issues with the buyers, maybe being a little bit stubborn, maybe not being that flexible. So by the time he came to us, we found tons of buyers for him, and the buyer that he worked with, we were an excellent buffer between the buyer and the seller, just because things really kind of get heated and awkward and uncomfortable. And so we stood to really represent that seller, but nurture the buyer to the finish line.
Yeah. Yeah, emotion, one of the things that we teach in our course is that communication will not be linear, it'll be confusing, might be messy, and expect emotion. Not always anger, not always, but definitely emotion plays a big part in this, and that's part of what you do, is manage some of the emotions. And they use the word buffer, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So this particular business was, high end. It was in a small town. You received several inquiries, and but there was a handful of issues with the sale. Let's break those down. One was buyer financing. Talk about that for a moment.
Yes, so there was an issue with the buyer getting an SBA loan for the business portion of the sale, and there were a couple reasons for that. One of the reasons was the buyer was not from the industry, which is something we see a lot. We have a lot of non-industry people coming in and buying, profitable salon, spas, and barber businesses. So the SBA really prefers that the buyer does have that industry experience, although that can be circumvented with a really great business plan and a desire to really work in the business. They don't like people that just want to invest and not be in the business. But so the second issue was the seller had not owned the business for 2 years quite yet. It would have been 2 years this coming May. And so the SBA wants to see that the seller has owned the business for more than 2 years in order to give funding. I'm not really sure why that is, but we didn't even really realize the dates until that came up. We knew that it was sometime in 2023 spring, and so that became an issue. And so the buyer ended up paying cash for the business.
Yeah. That's nice that you're able to pay in cash, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
And you might not know the answer to this one, but so when we're looking at that 2 years of ownership, was that also pertain to like a key employee? So let's say a key employee comes in and can't buy the entire business today, but does the clock start once they get some ownership? And does it matter for like a key employee if they want to get an SBA loan? So
Not typically. If somebody wants to buy the business that's working in the business, that's looked at a little bit differently as far as being more favorable because they already have that familiarity. They already understand the business model. A business plan would be extremely easy to write because they're basing it off of what they know. And so I don't know for sure, but I do not think that that is that much of an issue, truthfully, for a key employee buyout. And if the owner has owned it less than 2 years.
loose lips, as they say, sink ships. And that was another issue with this particular sale. Let's speak about that for a moment.
Yes, so the seller did end up telling a couple people in this smaller town that he wanted to exit the business. He did not have NDAs with these people. And so really the rumor mill kind of started. And, as we were under contract and moving towards the end, he got very, very anxious about people knowing what was going to happen or that it was for sale. And so it caused a lot of issues and paranoia. None of that was because of things we did, thankfully. We operate in a very private way. Obviously, it's very sensitive. And so, he just kind of got worked up about people knowing about what was going on. And so that kind of added an additional layer to this sale of anxiety and maybe just awkwardness. So I would recommend really keeping it nice and tight within your personal circle and with your broker, or if you're, just working with your buyer, keeping it really in that circle.
Another issue with the sale was there was no LOI, which stands for letter of intent, and instead the seller came in hot with a asset purchase agreement. So talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, so the typical cadence in selling a business is the buyer submits a letter of intent, which is a non-binding legal agreement, and that sets the course for the way that the whole transaction is going to go down. So in this case, the buyer did submit an LOI. The seller had sold a business before, was very tight with his attorney, and decided that in order to his idea of circumventing the LOI was to move the sale along faster, and truthfully, it probably did. So, excuse me, he told us, I'm going to create an asset purchase agreement, and that's what we're going to work from. And so we had to explain to the buyer why there was not going to be an LOI and that we were just moving right to the asset purchase agreement that was to close in February, all of that. So it was shocking to the buyer. It's not what I would recommend. It did work in this case, although it was a little bit clunky. And so the buyer did sign the APA, the asset purchase agreement. And then we just wrote amendments to that agreement as the due diligence period moved forward. And I think we had a total of 3 or 4 amendments to both the real estate and to the business. And so it did end up working out great, but that was really shocking to the buyer, especially because he had not bought a business before. So interesting stuff.
Gotcha. All right, interesting. Yeah, definitely some issues with the sale. So, all right, let's talk about the difference between an asset and a stock sale
Yes.
and what you can and cannot do as a business broker. So, you want to spend a moment there?
Sure. So most businesses are asset sales, and we do work within the asset sales space. And I know that term is really confusing for people because a lot of times you'll hear asset sale and you think it's just equipment and build out. But really that actually means, I like to call those pure asset sales just to sort of differentiate. That's my own term. I wish there was a different term for it, but an asset sale is the sale of a business, a single owner, or multiple owners, that there is not stock involved. We do not do stock sales. That requires a securities license, which I don't have yet, but is something that I will be getting. It is a very long, intensive process. And so we can help facilitate with a securities sale and working with a securities broker, but those are much more complex. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because right now we have a deal in progress where the buyer has made an offer on an asset sale and wants the working capital to stay in the business. And that does not happen unless it's a stock sale. So the owner does not turn over their bank accounts and provide that working capital. That's actually something that's factored into the loan and to the offer. So those are the biggest differences, I think, between an asset sale and a stock sale.
Yeah, there's a lot of tax differences too, and in terms of favorability or unfavorability, seller and buyer. The a lot of key employee sales are more stock sales, and a stock sale is an asset sale, especially when there's a new party that comes in, there's no history. You're going to want an asset sale for a lot of different reasons, including you aren't subject to the sins of the past. You know, let's say that you bought stock in it, you bought the business and you got the stock, and you find out a year later that there was a lawsuit that was pending, or there was a loan that wasn't disclosed, and so yeah, so asset versus stock sale very much depends on the circumstance, but okay. Now you had a lot of people throw their hat in the ring for this, and what type of people expressed an interest in this business?
Right. So I will start by saying the sale price was over $1 million. So it definitely cut out some people. The buyer, or I'm sorry, the seller was open
Excuse me
to
one
just,
second.
yeah,
Did that include the real estate?
yes.
Okay, all right, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah,
However, we did have it listed separately because the seller was definitely open to selling the business independent of the building, holding on to the building and then selling. It really kind of depended on, who the actual buyer was. But the sale price of the business was high enough that it scared off the right people. And so our buyer pool was pretty large. We had a large variety of buyers. About 20% or so were beauty industry professionals who wanted to inherit a robust business. The other 80% were investor types, which is very common when we list businesses over $500,000. Some had innate experience in the beauty industry, some did not. There were a couple of competitors that were in the ring that had other locations. Maybe they wanted to move their people over there and have a larger location. This was a pretty large space. And so we did have a really large buyer pool to work with. When I'm training my brokers, I tell them about 50% of the buyers are serious. Some are just poking around and hoping to get information, which they don't get unless they sign the NDA and go through our process. However, yeah, we had really great, there was a wonderful, probably one of the best responses we've ever had to a business of this size as far as the buyer pool.
gotcha. Well, there's some lessons learned. Let's get to those next. First one is about giving yourself time.
Yes, time is really your friend. And, we do see a lot of sellers that come in hot. Maybe something has happened and now suddenly they want to sell, sometimes an illness that's really common, cancer or husband dies or something like that. And it really makes it more difficult for us. And that was the case here in this situation because the seller was overly motivated to sell and really should have called us from the beginning. And so giving yourself time, this is not a fast process. It is as slow as it gets. And really, we're kind of, we have to go at the buyer's pace. Of course, we're here to move things along, but we can't force people to take action. We can't force people to do things. And it's the same in any business transaction, whether it's a key employee buyout, it is up to the buyer. The buyer has to get funding. The buyer has to do due diligence. The buyer has to fully understand. Sometimes they need to write a business plan. So it is just a very slow process, even from, the time you get an offer to close. 3 months is really pretty quick. for that to happen. And so give yourself time to sell, plan way ahead, get evaluation way ahead. If you're going to list, at least a year from when you want to actually exit. And so, yeah, time is definitely your friend if you work with it in the sale of a business.
What if you listed a year before you want to exit, and then you get someone that comes in hot, and so you list the business and you say you're really not ready for a year, but someone comes in, they like your price, they want to get the deal done. What do you do in that case?
It really depends on the owner, what their role is in the business. And so if they are a service provider, if they part-time provide services, it's reasonable for them to stay there and do that for X amount of time and or be part of, every sale involves a transition period to where the seller is educating the buyer, training them on all the processes. That's usually 30 to 90 days. So they are still involved in the business for that time frame. So, it really depends on the seller and what role they want to play. I would tell the seller, take this money and be thankful and just get your exit going a little earlier. Go ahead and move to the island, plan your move 6 months out. But I would say just be flexible and reasonable if that is the case.
Another way of describing what you said is take the money and run.
Yes,
That's what you wanted to say, right?
yes, yes.
All right. Talk about SBA pre-qualification for a moment.
Right, right. So we can pre-qualify businesses with the SBA, and what that means is we're submitting, doing evaluation, submitting the P&Ls and submitting 3 years worth of tax returns in order for us to understand what the lenders would guarantee on this business. And that is a really great place to start within 2 years or so of selling, because then you understand, because it's one thing for us to say, this is what we think you can get for the business. It's another thing when the lenders get involved and they're going through everything. Another great reason to keep really clean books, because if the lenders have to go through the books and really try to understand it, it's probably going to be flagged. And so you can get your business pre-qualified with the SBA. We work with a couple different lenders that can do that. But I think understanding what, excuse me, what a loan could be for the business is really, really important. And truthfully, it is also including any type of seller financing.
Yeah. And then another lesson learned, of course, is hire help. Let's speak about that for a moment.
Oh, absolutely. And so whether it is a broker or any type of intermediary, your attorney, your accountant, whomever you need to help you in the sale, it's super, super important. We've had a lot of buyers reach out lately for help, which is really cool. We love helping both buyers and sellers. It's a different role, of course, but having that help and having somebody you can talk to and having that buffer is really, really valuable in any situation, whether it's a key employee buyout or if it's an outside buyer, just because the emotional piece of it alone, just helping to manage that. I had a sale that it got pretty ugly on both the buyer side and the seller side. But of course, I am tempering the emails and kind of changing the language around so nobody's getting upset, just in order for this to happen, because that was everybody's goal. But having that help is absolutely instrumental to a successful sale.
All right. Any final words, Susan? Great session with you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think we've covered most of it, but if you have questions or if you want that SBA pre-qualification, we have a team of brokers that is happy to help. We have a ton of free content on our website that you can use. You can use our free valuation tool. There's just lots of free guidance. I have several videos as far as what to expect when selling. Those are free to watch. Those are really great things to understand before getting in. But I would say the education piece and setting yourself up for success is the most important piece of a successful sale.
Wonderful. And I think that's why we're so excited about the Succession Masterclass is, it's a way for people to get that education and beauty industry specific, whether it's owner readiness, business readiness, or buyer readiness. So thanks for being such a great partner. Let's everybody give Susan a virtual round of applause. Give her a little bit of shout out in the chat there. You'll be welcome to the Brain Trust and get your official $1 million light bulb. and also earn a special invitation to Light Bulb Moments at the Phil, which is coming up on May 18th. So thanks again, Susan, for joining us today and for your wisdom, and the rest of you. Thanks for joining us on this forum, Light Bulb Moments. And also, we want to give another shout out to both Zenoti and Lightheart Sanders for their sponsorship. So until next week, folks, we'll see you again. And thanks again for our special guest, Susan, joining us today. And we hope you have a great rest of the week. Bye now.
Thank you.